They say music is the language of the soul. But what happens when your soul speaks in a tongue the world refuses to hear? That's how Kalin learned that sometimes the most beautiful melodies are born from the deepest silence. The morning the Alpha King's decree reached their village was the morning he discovered that being voiceless might be worse than being dead. The proclamation arrived with frost, carried by 3 royal messengers, whose wolves stood taller than houses. Kalin watched from the bakery's back entrance, as villagers gathered in the square, their breath forming clouds in the bitter dawn air. He shouldn't have been there. Omegas weren't meant to witness royal announcements directly, but curiosity had always been his weakness. By order of His Majesty, Alpha King Thaddeus Ravencrest, the herald's voice boomed. A challenge is issued to all unmated Omegas of the realm. Kalin's fingers unconsciously moved to his throat, to the thin scar that ran across his vocal cords. The injury that had stolen his voice 3 years ago still ached in the cold. Around him, other Omegas emerged from doorways, drawn despite the early hour. The king seeks an Omega of exceptional musical talent, the herald continued. Any Omega who can perform the legendary moon song in its entirety shall become the king's mate. Elevated to power beyond imagination, whispers erupted. The moon song was considered impossible a piece, so complex it required not just skill, but something indefinable. No one had successfully performed it in centuries. Furthermore, those who attempt and fail shall serve a year in the royal palace. The king himself will judge each performance. Kalin turned to leave, but Master Aldwin, his employer, grabbed his arm. The old baker had taken Kalin in after the incident that destroyed his voice, though kindness had nothing to do with it. A silent Omega was perfect tunable to complain about 16-hour workdays or sleeping with grain sacks. "Don't even think about running," Aldwin hissed. "You owe me 3 years still." But Kalin wasn't thinking about running. He was remembering. Before the attack, before his voice was taken, he had been different. His mother said he was born humming, that melodies followed him like shadows. He could play any instrument within hours, could harmonize with wind itself. Music had been his breath, his purpose. Then came that night, the Alpha who couldn't accept rejection, the hands around his throat, the crushing pressure that destroyed everything. Now he communicated through gestures and written words when available. The village saw him as less than Omega creature without purpose. Even other Omegas avoided him, as if muteness might be contagious. "Pathetic," someone muttered. A mute Omega thinking about the moon song. He wasn't thinking about it. What use was a legendary song to someone who couldn't sing? That night, lying on his makeshift bed among flour sacks, Kalin dreamed of music. Not simple folk songs, but something else, a melody that pulled at his soul, beautiful and terrible, like moonlight given sound. He woke with tears on his face, hands moving in complex patterns, as if playing an invisible instrument. The next morning brought royal guards to the bakery. "We're collecting names of all Omegas who wish to attempt the challenge," one announced. Aldwin laughed cruelly. "No one here would dare. All Omegas must be given the choice," the guard insisted. His eyes found Kalin. "You there, do you wish to attempt?" Before Kalin could gesture, Aldwin spoke. "That one's mute. Damaged goods. Couldn't sing if his life depended on it." The guards exchanged glances. "Mute?" 3 years now, Aldwin confirmed. His voice was nothing special anyway. That was a lie. Kalin's voice had been extraordinary, but he had no way to protest. Still, the king's decree says all Omegas, even the mute one, must be registered. They wrote, Kalin Ashworth. Omega, mute, age 23. As they left, one guard looked back. The challenge begins in 1 week. All registered Omegas will be brought to the palace. Aldwin's face darkened once they were gone. "If you embarrass me before the king, you'll regret it." But that night, the dream returned stronger. The melody wrapped around him like silk, pulling him somewhere unseen. In the dream, impossibly, he heard his own voice know as it had been, but transformed, singing something that made stars weep. The week passed in a blur. Each night the dreams intensified, the melody becoming clearer. By the time the royal carriage arrived, Kalin could feel the music thrumming in his bones, desperate for release. As the palace appeared on the horizon-white towers, spiraling impossibly into clouds, Kalin pressed his bound hands against the window. Aldwin had insisted on restraints, claiming he might flee. "Look at the mute one," another Omega laughed. "What's he going to do, mime the moon's song? Let them laugh." They didn't know about the dreams growing stronger each night, about the melody playing constantly in his mind. Being mute had taught him to hear what others missed: music in heartbeats, rhythm in breathing, melodies hidden in everyday sound. The palace gates sang as they opened, a haunting chord that made every Omega fall silent. Kalin felt that sound in his bones, recognized it. The opening note of his dreams. The throne room was a cathedral of ice and light, its ceiling disappearing into darkness where stars flickered, real or illusion. Kalin couldn't tell. At the far end, on a throne carved from frozen midnight, sat Alpha King Thaddeus Ravencrest. Kalin's breath caught. The king was beauty and terror, personified hair, absorbing light like void, eyes the color of storm clouds, features sharp as broken glass. Power radiated from him in waves that made every Omega whimper. All except Kalin, who couldn't make a sound. "So," the king's voice was dark honey poured over shattered crystal. "These are the hopefuls who think they can master the moon song." His gaze swept over them dismissively until it landed on Kalin, bound and silent. Those steel-gray eyes narrowed dangerously. "You there. Step forward." Kalin moved clumsily, his bound hands making him stumble. Whispers followed like ghosts. "Why are you restrained?" the king demanded. Master Aldwin's voice cut through. "Apologies, Your Majesty. That Omega belongs to me. He's mute and simple-minded. I tried to prevent." "Mute?" The king descended with predatory grace. "Yet here to attempt a song? A misunderstanding. He can't even—" "Silence." The king circled Kalin slowly. "You're from Ashworth Village, the baker's Omega." Kalin nodded. "You truly cannot speak?" Another nod. The king laughed coldly. "How amusing. A mute Omega here to sing the moon song. Tell me, do you play instruments?" Kalin's hands twitched toward explanation, but the ropes prevented complex movement. He could only nod. "Which ones?" How could he explain he played everything? That instrument spoke to him in ways voices never could? He raised his bound hands, trying to indicate many, but the gesture looked pathetic. "Can't even answer properly." The king turned to address the room. "This is what happens when desperation meets delusion. A mute Omega who thinks he can perform the moon song." Laughter erupted from the assembled court. "Your Majesty," an advisor stepped forward. "Perhaps we should send this one home?" "No." The king's smile was sharp as winter ice. "Let him stay. It will be educational. To see what happens when someone reaches beyond their station." He moved closer, his scent pine and storm and something darker overwhelming. "You have 1 week to prepare. On the 7th night, you'll attempt the moon song. When you fail, because you will fail spectacularly, you'll serve as my personal entertainment for a year." A mute jester. The room erupted in cruel laughter. Kalin kept his eyes on the king's, refusing to bow to humiliation. Something flickered in those storm-colored eyes. Surprise? Intrigue? "Guards, cut his restraints. If he's to fail, let him do so freely." As the ropes fell away, Kalin immediately signed "thank you" before he could stop himself. The king's eyes sharpened. "You know sign language." Kalin nodded. "Interesting. Not simple-minded after all, just damaged." The king turned away. "Take them to their quarters. The week begins now." The Omega quarters were luxurious silk sheets, private rooms, fine food, but felt like prison cells. Each Omega had been assigned a practice room. The halls echoed with voices attempting scales, arpeggios, fragments of ancient songs. Everyone except Kalin. His practice room contained instruments he'd only dreamed of. A grand piano with keys of polished bone, harps strung with what looked like starlight, flutes carved from humming crystals. But what drew him was the strange instrument dominating the center, the celestial organ from his dreams. Its keys extended in multiple directions, some requiring feet, others hands, still others responding to breath alone. Impossibly complex, absolutely beautiful. The moment his fingers touched the keys, he understood. This wasn't just an instrument, it was the instrument. The one the moon song had been written for. But how could he play it without a voice? A knock interrupted. An elderly servant entered, eyes milky with age. "You're the mute one," she said without mockery. "I'm Vesper. I've served here 60 years. Kalin nodded, signing a greeting. "I don't understand signs, child, but I know music. And secrets." She shuffled closer, touching the celestial organ. "The moon song isn't what they think. It was never meant to be sung. The true song is in the silence between notes." Kalin's hands flew in questions he couldn't voice. 200 years ago, an Omega named Chorus attempted the moon song. They couldn't speak, born that way. But when they touched this instrument, something extraordinary happened. They played without singing. The music came from the instrument, from their soul, from the air itself. She guided his hands to particular keys, but Chorus didn't complete it. They stopped at the final movement, the sixth, called the Immortal Passage, because it requires sacrifice. To complete the moon song, you must be willing to become the song itself. After she left, Kalin spent hours at the celestial organ. His fingers found ancient patterns. The instrument responded to more than touch it, read intention, emotion, essence. By the third night, something shifted. As his fingers moved, he heard it not with ears but deeper. The moon song, playing through his silence. Each note resonated in the air, visible as silver threads. By the fifth night, other Omegas noticed. They paused outside his door, drawn by something they couldn't quite hear but definitely felt. On the sixth night, the king himself appeared in Kalin's practice room, moving with silent grace that belied his size. "I've heard interesting reports," Thaddeus said, leaning against the doorframe. "My servants claim you've been creating disturbances." Kalin's hand stilled on the keys, frozen under that penetrating gaze. "Play for me. It wasn't a request." Kalin positioned himself at the celestial organ, took an unnecessary breath, and began. The first movement was simply a lullaby for dying stars. His fingers found keys by instinct, and though no voice emerged from his throat, the air itself began to sing. The king's eyes widened, his perfect composure cracking like ice under spring sun. "How?" He stepped forward, then stopped, as the second movement began. This was the Tempest Passage, all fury and heartbreak. Windows rattled. Somewhere in the palace, glass shattered. The king's hands gripped the doorframe hard enough to splinter ancient wood. Kalin stopped before the third movement. He turned to face the king, whose eyes now held something that looked almost like fear. "Tomorrow night," the king said, his voice rough as gravel, "you'll play the complete song. Every movement, every note." He paused at the door. "If you succeed, I'll claim you as promised. If you fail," his smile was sharp enough to draw blood, "the entertainment value will be worth keeping you alive." The great hall transformed for the seventh night. Every noble within 3 days' ride had come to witness the spectacle. Other challengers had gone first, some managing a few bars before their voices cracked, others failing immediately when faced with the song's impossible runs. Now it was Kalin's turn. He walked to the center where the celestial organ had been moved. The massive instrument seemed to pulse with inner light, its keys reflecting faces like broken mirrors. Whispers started immediately. "The mute one? This should be amusing. 50 gold says he runs." King Thaddeus sat on his throne, dressed in midnight blue that made his eyes look like frozen lightning. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers drummed against the armrest, the only sign of any emotion. "Lords and ladies," the king announced, his voice silencing the hall instantly. "Our final contestant is unique, an Omega who cannot speak, yet claims he can perform the moon song. I'm sure we're all curious how he plans to sing without a voice." Laughter rippled through the crowd like a disease. Someone threw fruit that splattered near Kalin's feet. "Begin!" the king commanded. "Or forfeit now, and save us the embarrassment." Kalin sat at the celestial organ. He placed his hands on keys that warmed under his touch like living things. The instrument recognized him, welcomed him like an old friend. He closed his eyes and began. The first note rang out not from his throat, but from the air itself. The second note joined, harmonizing impossibly from a single player. By the third note, the palace walls themselves hummed. Kalin played the lullaby for dying stars, and the enchanted ceiling showed real constellations fading in and out of existence. He moved into the storm of hearts, and wind whipped through the hall despite closed windows. Nobles gasped as their heartbeats aligned with the rhythm. The third movement, the lover's lament, required words of love and loss so profound they could move the heavens. Kalin played, and though his throat produced no sound, every person heard the words in their own mind, in their own voice, speaking their deepest heartbreak. Tears streamed down faces. Hardened warriors sobbed. Even the king's perfect mask cracked, a single tear tracking down his cheek. The fourth movement, the dragon's dance, had his fingers flying, feet working pedals, elbows finding keys, creating a symphony of motion as beautiful to watch as to hear. Fire seemed to dance in the air, though nothing burned. The fifth movement was the ocean's memory. The hall filled with salt scent and wave sounds that existed nowhere but in the music. People swore they felt sand between their toes. Then, the sixth movement, the one no one had reached in 2 centuries. The immortal passage. Kalin hesitated. Vesper's words echoed. "To complete the moon song, you must be willing to become the song itself." He looked at the king, met those winter-dark eyes, and saw recognition. Understanding, as if the king knew exactly what this moment meant. Kalin played the first note of the immortal passage. Pain lanced through his chest like lightning. His body began glowing with silver light. He was dissolving, becoming sound itself. Yet he kept playing. The audience screamed, some trying to run but frozen by the music's power. The king stood from his throne. "Stop!" But his voice was lost in the symphony. Kalin played on. His fingers were translucent now, wisps of music given form. This was the sacrifice, not death, but transformation. To complete the moon song meant becoming it forever. But just as the final note approached, strong hands grabbed his wrists, pulling them from the keys. The king held him, his own hands burning from contact with the transforming Omega. "Enough," he said, and this time his voice carried alpha command so powerful it shattered the spell. Kalin solidified, gasping, collapsing into the king's arms. The hall was silent except for their ragged breathing. "You fool," the king whispered. "You beautiful, impossible fool. You would have disappeared forever." Kalin woke in a bed softer than clouds, in a room that could have held his entire village. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting rainbows across silk sheets. Every nerve felt struck by lightning and after effect of nearly dissolving into pure music. "Don't move." King Thaddeus stepped from shadows by the window, looking exhausted. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, eyes rimmed red. "The healers say you need 3 days to recover. What you almost did changed you fundamentally." Your body is still deciding whether to be flesh or song. Kalin's hands shook as he signed. Why did you stop me? The king's jaw tightened. You would have died. Transformed. Become eternal. Become nothing. The king snapped. A pretty sound that would fade. Is that what you wanted? To disappear? Kalin turned away. Part of him had wanted exactly that, to become something beautiful enough that his muteness wouldn't matter. Rest, the king said coldly. The bonding ceremony is in 3 days. He paused at the door. Your old master has been dealt with. He won't claim any more Omega servants. Before Kalin could ask what that meant, the king was gone. The next 2 days blurred with healers and preparations. Vesper visited, her ancient face bright with something like pride. You did it, child. You played the true song. Even incomplete. More than anyone managed in centuries. Kalin signed questions she couldn't read, frustrated. Finally, he grabbed paper and wrote, The king understood my signs. How? Vesper's eyes widened. He did? That's very interesting indeed. She left without explaining. On the 3rd day, Kalin explored his new quarters, part of the royal wing, connected to the king's chambers by a locked door. He had instruments, books, a desk for composing, paradise, yet it felt like a gilded cage. That evening, a servant brought elaborate ceremony robes. As Kalin dressed in white silk embroidered with silver moons, he caught his reflection. He looked important. Whole. The illusion shattered when he tried to hum, and no sound emerged. The ceremony was held in the moon garden, under the full moon. Only highest nobility attended. They watched with curiosity and barely hidden disgust. A mute Omega bonded to their perfect king scandal for generations. King Thaddeus stood at the altar, devastating in formal black with silver trim. When he saw Kalin, something flickered across his face too quick to identify. The officiant began traditional words. Kalin couldn't respond vocally, but the king had arranged alternative nods, written consents, gestures. Awkward, stilted, nothing like tradition demanded. Do you, Kalin Ashworth, accept this bond freely? Kalin nodded, though freely seemed strange for a choice made under challenged terms. And do you, King Thaddeus Ravencrest, claim this Omega as your bonded mate? I do, the king said with odd weight. The bonding bite should have been next. But the king hesitated, fingers ghosting over Kalin's throat, tracing the scar that had stolen his voice. With your permission, he said quietly. Unusual alphas didn't typically ask. Kalin nodded, tilting his head. The king's teeth were gentle, precise. The bite sent fire through Kalin's veins, a connection snapping into place. For a moment, he felt the king's emotions: desire, guilt, fear, and something like recognition. Then the king pulled back, and the connection muted to a whisper. It is done, the officiant announced. The feast afterward was torture. Kalin sat beside the king, unable to participate in conversation, enduring veiled insults disguised as congratulations. Such a shame, Lady Corvina said loudly, that His Majesty's mate can't even sing him a love song. Indeed, Lord Aurelius agreed. One wonders what compensation such a mate could offer. The king's hand found Kalin's under the table, squeezing once. My mate's value, the king said with deadly softness, is beyond your comprehension. He performed the moon song itself. Silence fell like a blade. Later, in their chambers, the connecting door, now unlocked, the king stood by the window, staring at the moon. They're right, he said quietly. A king should have a mate who can speak, bear heirs, lead beside him. Not. Kalin moved beside him, signing angrily. Not someone damaged? The king caught his hands. Not someone I must protect from the court they should rule. I didn't ask for protection, Kalin signed forcefully. No, you asked for nothing. You simply played a song that should have killed you, with more courage than any warrior. His thumb traced Kalin's wrist. Do you know why I really stopped you? Kalin shook his head. Because I've heard that song before. In dreams. Every night for 7 years. I've dreamed of the moon song played exactly as you played it. In those dreams, the one playing had no voice. Kalin's eyes widened. I thought I was going mad, the king continued. Then you appeared a mute Omega attempting the moon song. Like watching dreams manifest into reality. He released Kalin's hands, stepping back. Rest. Tomorrow you begin duties as consort. As he turned to leave, Kalin caught his sleeve, writing quickly on nearby paper. Why do you understand sign language? The king read it, expression closing off. Everyone has secrets, Kalin. Even kings. Especially kings. He left through the connecting door. The lock clicked back into place. Life as the king's consort followed strange patterns. By day, Kalin was displayed like an exotic pet prison at court but never participating, dressed beautifully but unable to hide what he lacked. Nobles had learned not to mock openly after the king sent Lord Aurelius to the dungeons, but their thoughts showed clearly in their eyes. By night, things differed completely. The king would come to Kalin's chambers never, inviting him to his own end. They would communicate. Kalin would sign. The king would respond. Conversations ranging from music to philosophy to kingdom history. During these nights, Kalin glimpsed someone else beneath the king's cold exterior. Play for me, the king would request, and Kalin would sit at the piano, creating melodies that needed no voice. Sometimes the king closed his eyes, tension draining from his shoulders. Once, Kalin caught him humming along perfect harmony to a song just invented. You have perfect pitch, Kalin signed, surprised. The king's eyes snapped open, softness vanishing instantly. Many people do, but many couldn't harmonize instinctively with complex melodies never heard before. Kalin filed this observation with other strange things. How the king's hands sometimes moved in patterns resembling sign language. How he knew obscure musical terms. How his fingers danced across invisible keys when he thought Kalin wasn't looking. 3 weeks into their bonding, Kalin discovered everything. He'd been exploring the palace library, searching for new music, when he found a restricted section behind a hidden panel. Inside were journals in careful handwriting, dating back 7 years. The first entry stopped his heart. The curse begins tomorrow. I've agreed to the witch's terms. Better to be thought dead than live with the shame of what I am. The kingdom needs a perfect alpha king, not someone like me who... You shouldn't be reading those. Kalin spun. The king stood in the doorway, face pale as winter snow. These are yours, Kalin signed. Not a question. They belong to who I used to be. Kalin's hands moved frantically. The witch's curse you made a deal? The king laughed bitterly. Everyone assumes curses are punishments. Sometimes they're bargains, escapes. I wasn't always the alpha, you see. What were you? Kalin signed. Someone society considered worthless. Like you. The words hung heavy between them. Kalin reached for another journal, but the king caught his wrist. Don't. Please. Let me keep this one secret. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. During the harvest festival, the court gathered for traditional performances. A visiting soprano sang beautifully, then invited participation. Surely our new consort would honor us with a song. Silence fell like a stone. Every eye turned to Kalin. The consort cannot perform, the king said coldly. Oh, but I insist. Every Omega can sing something. He cannot. Suddenly, Kalin felt strange warmth in his throat. The bonding bite had done something, healed something partially. Not completely, but he touched his throat, shocked. The warmth spread, and he felt his vocal cords responding for the first time in 3 years. He opened his mouth, trying to form a sound. Ah, The sound was barely a whisper, rough and broken, but it was there. The king went rigid beside him. "Sing!" someone called. Others joined the chant. "Sing! Sing!" Kalin stood on shaking legs, approached the performance area. He tried to form a note. What emerged was cracked, horrible, like grinding glass. The court erupted in cruel laughter. "That's our consort? He sounds like a dying crow!" The king bonded with that? Kalin stood frozen, humiliated. His voice mourned for 3 years was worse than no voice at all. He was about to flee when he heard it. Someone else singing. The voice was perfect, pure, impossibly beautiful. It took the soprano's song and elevated it to something divine, hitting notes that shouldn't be possible. The court fell silent, searching for the source. It was the king. He stood beside his throne, singing with a voice that shamed every professional performer. But more as he sang, his appearance flickered. For moments, Kalin saw through the alpha facade to something underneath. Someone smaller, softer, moving with the music like they were born to it. The song ended. The king's appearance solidified back. Anyone who mocks my consort's voice again will lose their own. The threat was clear. Silence reigned. That night, the king didn't come to Kalin's chambers. Kalin waited, then approached the connecting door. Locked, but he heard someone playing the celestial organ brilliantly. Then that impossible voice, singing wordlessly. The truth hit like lightning. The king wasn't an alpha at all. Kalin knocked urgently. The music stopped. Long silence before the lock clicked open. The king stood there, looking vulnerable. His storm-cloud eyes held a warning. "You know," he said. "Not a question." Kalin nodded, signing. "You're an Omega." The king laughed, but it was a shattered sound. "Was? I was an Omega." He stepped back, allowing Kalin into his private chambers for the first time. The king's private chambers were nothing like Kalin expected. Where the rest of the palace was cold, marble, and perfect angles, this space was warm, lived in. Music sheets covered every surface. Instruments lined the walls. In the center, a twin to Kalin's celestial organ showed years of use. "My name wasn't always Thaddeus," the king said, moving to stand by the window. "I was born Theodora, second child, Omega worthless to the succession. But I could sing. They called me the Nightingale Prince." Kalin moved closer, his newly awakened voice managing a rough whisper. "What happened? I fell in love with an alpha who promised everything, who said he loved my voice, my music, my soul, then laughed when I thought he'd bond with me. Called me practice for finding a real mate." The king's form flickered, showing glimpses similar, softer, beautiful in an entirely different way. "My brother died in battle. Suddenly, I was heir to a throne. Omegas can't hold by law. That's when the witch appeared. The witch offered me a bargain," Theodora continued, her true form flickering more clearly now. "She would make me an alpha perfect, strong, everything a king should be. In exchange, this facade requires constant will. If I ever feel safe enough to be myself, the illusion breaks." The singing in the hall. "I couldn't watch them hurt you. Couldn't stand their mockery when you were so brave." Theodora's voice dropped. "I forgot to maintain the facade." Kalin's mind raced, pieces falling into place. "The moon song. Your perfect pitch. You're a musician." "Was. The illusion doesn't allow such softness. I can only play alone, sing when no one's listening. 7 years living as someone else entirely. Until you." "Me?" Theodora moved to the celestial organ, running fingers over keys without pressing them. "You played the moon song how I'd always heard it, without voice, because it doesn't need one. It needs soul, understanding, sacrifice. Everything they said Omegas couldn't possess. You created the challenge," Kalin realized, "looking for someone like me. Someone who understood music isn't about perfect voices, but truth. Theodora pressed a single key, the note hanging between them. I thought if I found that person, maybe I could stop pretending. Kalin approached slowly, placed his hand over Theodora's on the keys. Show me, he whispered with his damaged voice. The real you. Theodora's breath hitched. If anyone finds out, they won't. This room, this moment, just us. No kings, no consorts, just two musicians. Slowly, Theodora's form shifted completely. Harsh angles softened, height reduced, midnight hair lightened to warm brown. When finished, Theodora stood there still, beautiful, but real. This is me, she whispered in that pure, perfect voice from the hall. Kalin cupped her face gently. You're magnificent. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm a lie. You're surviving. We both are. They sat at the celestial organ together, 4 hands on keys. Without planning, they began playing. The melody that emerged was neither the moon song nor anything written. It was theirs, created in the moment. A conversation between souls who'd forgotten they could be understood. Theodora sang wordless harmonies that made air shimmer. Kalin's damaged voice couldn't match her range, but found notes he could hold, creating counterpoint beautiful in its imperfection. Hours passed. The moon traveled across the sky. Finally, exhausted, they stopped. Stay, Theodora whispered. Please. I know the bonding was just ceremony. You didn't choose this. But stay tonight. Let me be myself for one night. Kalin answered by pulling her into his arms. They lay together not as Alpha and Omega, not as king and consort, but as two people finding harmony in their mutual brokenness. What happens tomorrow? Kalin asked against her hair. I become Thaddeus again. Perfect Alpha King. She pressed closer. But maybe, privately in moments like this, you can be yourself. Kalin finished. We both can. As dawn approached, Theodora's form began shifting back, curse reasserting with sunrise. But before transformation completed, she whispered, I love you, not because you played the moon's song, because you see me. The real me. Kalin kissed her hymn now, as Thaddeus solidified and whispered back with his broken voice, I love you too, all of you. Days passed in this new pattern. Public facade, private truth. But challenges came quickly. During the full moon summit, King Aldrich brought his Omega son Prince Cassian graceful, eloquent, traditionally beautiful. Such a shame about your consort's limitations, Aldrich said at dinner, eyes calculating. Prince Cassian sings divinely, has proven fertile. Should you reconsider? Through their bond, Kalin felt Thaddeus's rage spike dangerously. My consort defeated every Omega at the Moonsong Challenge. His limitations make him extraordinary, of course, though one wonders about heirs. Valid concern. Kings needed heirs. A mute Omega was scandal enough. Potentially infertile was crisis. That night, Theodora cried in Kalin's arms. I can't give you children. This body, as Thaddeus its illusion, can't create life. And as Theodora, 2 Omegas can't produce heirs either. Kalin held her tighter, his broken voice soft. Do you want children? I want to stop failing everyone. The kingdom needs heirs. You've never failed me, he whispered. Never. Their second crisis came from an unexpected source. Vesper, the elderly servant who had helped Kalin understand the moon song. She cornered him one morning while Thaddeus held court. I know what the king is, she said quietly. Kalin's blood turned to ice in his veins. I served this palace 60 years, child. I knew Prince Theodora. Recognized the voice when the king sang in the hall. She studied his face carefully. You know too. Kalin could only nod, unable to deny it. Good. The kingdom needs truth, even if hidden. Take care of her, boy. She's been alone too long. She shuffled away before Kalin could respond, leaving him shaken. If Vesper knew, who else suspected? The answer came during the autumn festival. Rebels attacked the palace senate to kill, but to expose. They'd somehow learned about the curse. Your king is a fraud, their leader shouted, holding a witch-charmed crystal that revealed illusions. Let me show you all what he really. The crystal shattered. Kalin stood where he'd thrown a wine bottle, his damaged voice roaring with unexpected power. Enough! The hall went silent. Kalin had never spoken above a whisper, since his voice partially returned. The raw sound shocked everyone. You want truth? He rasped, each word tearing his throat. Truth is, our king saved me. Saved all of us. Truth is strength. He moved to stand beside Thaddeus's throne, taking the king's hand publicly. You attack with lies, he continued, voice cracking, bleeding. But I, who cannot sing, who can barely speak, I tell you, our king is exactly who this kingdom needs. He collapsed, throat seizing completely. Thaddeus caught him, and for a moment, just a moment, the facade flickered. Everyone saw it, the shift, the change, the truth underneath. But instead of chaos, there was silence. Then, slowly, the crowd began to kneel. Not to the perfect Alpha King, but to the ruler strong enough to be what they needed, regardless of the cost. That night, Theodora held Kalin as healers worked. His voice was gone. Again the strain had destroyed what little healing the bond had provided. Why? She whispered. Why sacrifice your voice for my lie? Kalin's hands were weak, but he managed to sign. Not a lie. You are the king this kingdom needs. Theodora or Thaddeus, you're extraordinary. The people will revolt when they learn the full truth. Then we face it together. Kalin signed. Always together. She kissed him desperately. When she pulled back, determination filled her eyes. There's something I need to tell you about the curse. About how to break it. Kalin's eyes widened. The witch told me there was one way. Only one. True love's acceptance. Someone who knows all of me, every secret, every flaw, and chooses me anyway. I choose you, Kalin signed immediately. Every day, every form. I know, but for the curse to break, I have to choose too. Choose to be myself completely, in front of everyone. No more hiding. The weight of that settled between them. Breaking the curse meant revealing everything to the kingdom. Risking revolution, assassination, complete rejection. We don't have to, Kalin signed. We can continue as we are, living in shadows, stealing moments of truth. Theodora asked. You deserve better. We both deserve better. A knock interrupted. A guard entered, bowing low. Your Majesty, urgent news. The witch who cursed use, she's been found. She requests an audience. Theodora's form solidified back into Thaddeus instantly. Bring her in. The witch who entered looked nothing like Kalin expected. Young, beautiful in an otherworldly way, with eyes holding ancient sadness. Hello, Theodora, she said softly. It's time we discussed ending our bargain. Morgana, Thaddeus said carefully. Why are you here? Because the curse is killing you. Morgana moved closer. Did you think maintaining two forms indefinitely would have no cost? Your body is tearing itself apart. You have perhaps a year before it fails entirely. Kalin's hands flew up in shock. Through their bond he felt Thaddeus's resignation. He'd known. He'd known he was dying and hadn't said anything. A year is enough to establish a successor, Thaddeus said coldly. A successor? Morgana laughed. You still don't understand. The curse wasn't meant to punish you, Theodora. It was meant to teach you. Teach me what? That I'm an abomination? No. To teach you that the greatest prison is the one we build for ourselves. She turned to Kalin. You understand, don't you? You who lost your voice but found ways to sing without it. Kalin nodded slowly. The moon song was my creation, Morgana continued. A test of the soul's willingness to transcend limitations. You passed that test, Kalin. You were willing to dissolve into music itself rather than remain trapped. But I stopped him, Thaddeus interjected, because you loved him more than you feared exposure. Just as he loved you enough to sacrifice his newly returned voice defending your secret. Morgana pulled out a vial filled with swirling silver liquid. This will break the curse permanently. But there's a catch. The curse will break publicly, Morgana explained, holding the silver vial. Everyone within a mile will see the transformation. There will be no hiding, no gradual revelation. The kingdom will know instantly that their Alpha King is actually an Omega. Thaddeus paled. They'll riot. The law states. Laws can change, Morgana interrupted. The question is, are you brave enough to be the catalyst for that change? Why? Kalin signed, unable to speak after destroying his voice defending Thaddeus. Morgana turned to him. Because I was like her once, an Omega with power, forced to hide it. I became a witch because it was the only way to have agency. When I saw Theodora's pain, I offered what I wished someone had offered, me a chance to be someone else. She sighed deeply. I didn't realize until too late that being someone else is just another form of prison. She set the vial on the table. The choice is yours. Continue living the lie until your body fails, or risk everything for the chance to live as yourself. The full moon festival, Thaddeus said suddenly. 3 days from now. The entire kingdom gathers in the square. Kalin signed frantically. Too public, too dangerous. It's perfect, Thaddeus countered. If I'm going to do this, everyone should see. No rumors, no doubts, just truth. Morgana nodded. Once you drink this, the transformation will begin at the next moment of pure emotion. Choose your moment wisely. She turned to leave, then paused. Kalin, your voice. I can heal it properly. Make it whole again. To sing again. Kalin's heart leaped at the possibility. But looking at Thaddeus, thinking of all they'd built from their mutual brokenness, he shook his head, signing, My voice is part of my story, part of who I am now. Morgana smiled. You truly are perfect for each other. For 3 days they prepared. Thaddeus met with his most trusted advisors, carefully testing loyalty. Beta Marcus swore to stand by his king regardless. Others gave more conditional responses. Vesper proved invaluable, revealing a network of servants who had always suspected and never cared. You think we serve you because you're an alpha? We serve you because you're a good ruler. The rest is just decoration. The night before the festival, Theodora and Kalin played one last duet in their private chamber. The melody was bittersweet, full of endings and beginnings. If they reject me, Theodora said, you could claim the bond was forced. Distance yourself. You'd be free. Kalin pulled her close, signing against her skin. Where you go, I go. Who you are, I love. Forever. The full moon festival dawned clear and bright. The square filled with thousands of citizens celebrating the harvest. At the center, a great stage had been erected for the king's address. Thaddeus stood before his people, the vial hidden in his palm. Kalin stood beside him, their hands linked. My people, Thaddeus began, his voice carrying across the square. For 7 years, I have ruled you, protected you, led you through war and peace, but I have done so behind a mask. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Today, I offer you truth. He raised the vial. Today, I trust you with who I really am. He drank the silver liquid in one motion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Thaddeus gasped, doubling over. His form began to shimmer, shift, dissolve, and reform. The crowd screamed, some fleeing, others pressing closer. When the transformation ended, Theodora stood before them. Smaller, softer, undeniably Omega. The square erupted in chaos. Kalin stepped forward, and though his voice was gone, he found a way. He sat at the celestial organ that had been placed on stage and began to play. The music that emerged was raw, powerful, speaking what his voice couldn't. The melody said, "This is still your king, the same ruler who protected you, who led you, who saved you." "But the law!" someone shouted. Beta Marcus stepped forward. "Laws are words on paper. This," he gestured to Theodora, "is courage made flesh." "This is madness!" Lady Corvina shrieked. "We've been ruled by an Omega for 7 years." "And yet," Prince Cassian emerged from the crowd, "they've been the best 7 years in your kingdom's history." The crowd wavered between tradition and truth. Then Theodora began to sing not the moon song, but a simple lullaby every citizen knew. Her impossibly pure voice filled the square with such beauty that hardened soldiers wept. Kalin accompanied her on the celestial organ, their music weaving together in perfect harmony. Despite his inability to sing, one by one, voices joined in. A small Omega girl who pushed through the crowd, Vesper, Marcus, Cassian. Soon hundreds were singing together. When the song ended, silence fell except for quiet weeping. "I am Theodora," she said simply. "I am Omega. I am your king. All of these things are true. If you cannot accept that, I will step down. But if you can, help me build a kingdom where no one has to hide who they are." Then someone threw a stone. It caught Theodora's temple, blood running down her face. More stones followed as the crowd split, some protecting their king, others calling for her blood. The stones fell like deadly rain. Kalin threw himself over Theodora, shielding her with his body as the crowd tore itself apart. Royal guards rushed forward, but the mass of people had become a living thing, half protecting their revealed king, half calling for her execution. "Abomination! She saved us! Death to the deceiver! Our true king!" Blood ran from cuts on Kalin's back where stones had struck. Theodora tried to push him aside, to stand and face her people, but he held her down, signing desperately against her palm. "Wait! Let them choose." Beta Marcus rallied the guards, forming a protective circle. "Those who stand with the king, to the left. Those against, to the right. Let's settle this properly." The crowd slowly separated, families sometimes splitting as they chose sides. When the division was complete, the supporters outnumbered the opposition, but not by much. Lord Garrett stepped forward from the opposition. "The law is sacred. No Omega can rule. This creature has made fools of us all." "Then we've been magnificent fools," an unexpected voice called out. An elderly alpha noble, Lord Edmund, moved to stand with Theodora. 7 years of prosperity under an Omega's rule. Perhaps it's the law that's foolish, not us. More nobles crossed over. With each defection, the opposition grew smaller but more violent. "Kill the pretender!" someone screamed, charging with a blade. Kalin moved without thinking. Though he couldn't cry out a warning, he intercepted the attacker, taking the blade meant for Theodora. It pierced his shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground. "Kalin!" Theodora's scream shattered windows throughout the square. The attack on Kalin, the mute Omega, who had defended their king, shifted something in the crowd's mood. Even some opposition members looked disturbed by the violence. Theodora knelt beside Kalin, pressing her hands to his wound. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why do you keep sacrificing yourself for me?" With his good hand, Kalin signed weakly, "Because you're worth it. You're all worth it." Prince Cassian stepped between them and the crowd. "Look at them," he shouted. "Look at what you're doing. You're stoning love. You're attacking courage. Is this the kingdom you want, Ton, that punishes truth?" A child's voice pierced the chaos. "Mama, why are they hurting the king? She made the bad people go away. She made food cheaper. She let me go to school. The simple words from a small beta child resonated. Parents looked at their children, remembering the changes of the past 7 years. Arts flourishing, education expanding, trade prospering. The child speaks wisdom, Marcus declared. Judge the ruler by their deeds, not their designation. The opposition wavered. Some dropped their stones. Others slunk away, but a core of hardliners remained. We'll never accept an Omega ruler, Lord Garrett declared. We'll rebel. Other kingdoms will support us. Then go, Theodora said, standing despite Kalin's wound. Her voice carried the same authority it had held as Thaddeus. Leave this kingdom. Find one that values your hatred over progress. But know this you leave alone. Your families, your lands, your titles all remain here, with those who choose courage over convention. It was a masterful move. Rebellion required resources, followers, legitimacy. Stripped of everything but their prejudice, the hardliners had nothing. One by one, they chose pragmatism over principle. Lord Garrett was the last to kneel, his face twisted with rage but defeated. The kingdom has spoken, Beta Marcus announced. Long live King Theodora. The cheer that rose was not unanimous, but it was enough. Later, in the palace, healers worked on Kalin's shoulder. The blade had done damage, but nothing fatal. Theodora refused to leave his side. Your Majesty, a healer said gently, you're still bleeding from your own wounds. Tend to him first, she commanded. But as the healer reached for Kalin again, something strange happened. Where Theodora's tears fell on his skin, the wounds began to close. Not completely, but enough to stop the bleeding. Morgana appeared in the doorway. Love's healing, she said simply. The curse is truly broken. You're free, Theodora. Free to be yourself. At what cost? Theodora asked, gesturing to Kalin's injuries. The cost of all freedom, Morgana replied. Blood, sacrifice, and the courage of those who love us. She approached Kalin. Your voice. The damage is severe. But there's something else. She placed a hand on his throat. The moon song changed you. You'll never speak normally again, but you might find other ways to communicate. Music has claimed you as thoroughly as it claimed her. Before they could ask what she meant, Morgana vanished, leaving only the scent of silver moonlight. That night, as Kalin recovered, Theodora made a royal decree. From this day forward, no designation shall determine a citizen's worth or potential. Omega, Beta, Alpha all are equal under the law. The words that would change their world forever had been spoken. But the real change, Theodora knew, would take generations. Looking at Kalin sleeping peacefully, despite his wounds, she whispered, We did it. We actually did it. His eyes opened. And though he couldn't speak, his smile said everything. 6 months after the revelation, the kingdom had transformed beyond recognition. Omegas held positions of power previously forbidden to them. Alphas learned gentleness without shame. Betas, no longer ignored as merely neutral, found their voices in governance. But change came with a price. 3 neighboring kingdoms had closed their borders, calling Theodora's rule an abomination against natural order. Trade routes were disrupted. Some noble families quietly funded resistance movements. Every day brought new challenges. Kalin had become Theodora's silent strength. Though his voice was completely gone now, he developed something else when he played the celestial organ. People could hear words in the music, not with their ears, but with their hearts. He'd become the kingdom's first musical oracle, translating emotions and ideas through pure sound. During a particularly tense council meeting about the border closures, Kalin played a simple melody that somehow communicated complex diplomatic solutions. The notes suggested patience, alternative routes, new alliances with distant kingdoms that might be more open to change. How does he do that? Prince Cassian asked. He'd remained in Theodora's kingdom, establishing an Omega Council that advised on policy. Love, Theodora said simply. Love finds a way to speak when words fail. But their greatest challenge was yet to come. A messenger arrived from the Eastern Coalition 5 kingdoms, united in their opposition to Theodora's reforms. Their ultimatum was simple: abdicate and install a proper alpha ruler, or face war. They outnumber us 10-1. Beta Marcus reported grimly. Even with our prosperity, we cannot match their combined forces. That night, Theodora found Kalin in the music room, playing a melody so sad it made the walls weep condensation. We've come so far, she said, sitting beside him. I won't give up now. Kalin's hands moved from the keys to sign. Then we don't fight with swords. What do you mean? His signs were careful, deliberate. The moon song. Together. Not as weapon, but as truth. Theodora understood immediately. You want to play the complete moon song? The real one, with the immortal passage. Kalin nodded, then signed. Not to transform, but to show them. Show them what Omegas can do, what love can create. It could kill us both. Then we die as ourselves, not live as lies. The day the enemy armies arrived, Theodora and Kalin stood on the palace walls, with a celestial organ that had been modified to project sound across the entire valley. What trickery is this? The enemy commander shouted. No trick, Theodora called back. Just truth. The truth of what two Omegas can create together. They began to play 4 hands on the keys, Theodora's voice soaring while Kalin's fingers flew. This wasn't the moon song, as anyone had heard it before. This was the complete version, all 6 movements, including the immortal passage that dissolved the boundaries between player and music. As they played, something miraculous happened. The music became visible silver threads connecting every heart in the valley. Enemy soldiers found themselves feeling what Theodora and Kalin felt: the pain of hiding, the joy of acceptance, the power of choosing love over fear. The Omega soldiers in the enemy ranks began to weep, then to sing along, then to lay down their weapons. Stop them! The enemy commanders ordered, but their own voices were drowned in the music. By the 4th movement, even alpha warriors were crying, remembering their own moments of vulnerability, times they'd been forced to be stronger than they felt. The 5th movement showed them visions a world where designation didn't determine destiny, where children grew up free to be themselves, where strength meant lifting others up, not holding them down. The 6th movement, the immortal passage, began. Theodora and Kalin started to glow, their forms becoming translucent. But this time, they didn't dissolve. Instead, their love, their story, their truth spread through the silver threads to every person present. For a moment, everyone felt what it was like to be voiceless but still have something to say, to be dismissed but still have worth, to be different but still deserve love. When the song ended, the battlefield was silent except for sobbing. The enemy commander dismounted, walked forward, and knelt. Forgive us, he said. We didn't understand. One by one, the armies knelt. Not in defeat, but in recognition. Rise, Theodora commanded, her voice hoarse. Rise as equals. But the cost of playing the complete moon song was evident. Both Theodora and Kalin collapsed, their life forces nearly depleted. Morgana appeared one final time. You've done something I never thought possible, she said. You've turned the moon song from a test into a gift. You've shown that power isn't about domination, but about connection. She produced 2 vials. These will restore you, but you'll be changed. The moon song has claimed you permanently. You'll never be quite human again. You'll be living bridges between the possible and impossible. They drank without hesitation. When they woke, they found the world had changed. The 5 kingdoms had withdrawn their armies and were drafting new laws. Omegas across the continent were rising up, demanding equality. The revolution had spread beyond borders. The change from the vials was subtle at first. Theodora's voice now carried harmonics that could soothe rage or inspire courage with a single note. Kalin's touch on any instrument created music that transcended sound. People could taste colors and see emotions when he played. But the deepest change was in their bond. Where once they'd needed proximity to feel connected, now they could sense each other across any distance. Not thoughts, exactly, but essence. The feeling of being fundamentally not alone. A year passed. The kingdom had become a beacon for those seeking freedom from designation-based oppression. Refugees arrived, daily omegas fleeing forced servitude, betas seeking recognition, even alphas exhausted by the pressure to dominate. Among these refugees came a young omega girl named Sira, barely 15. Heavily pregnant and unable to speak, her voice had been taken as punishment for refusing an alpha twice her age. The parallel to Kalin's own story was unmistakable. "We'll help you," Theodora promised, but Sira's eyes remained hollow, defeated. Kalin sat with her for hours, not trying to communicate, just playing soft melodies on a small harp. Slowly, Sira began to respond not with words or signs, but with humming. Broken, tuneless at first, but undeniably present. Music finds a way. Kalin signed to Theodora that night, just as it found us. Sira gave birth to twin zone alpha, 1 omega, the first recorded case of different designations from the same birth. The medical scholars were baffled, but Morgana, visiting briefly, simply smiled. "The world is rewriting its own rules," she said. "Your courage gave it permission, but not everyone celebrated these changes." A secret organization called the Pure Order had formed, dedicated to restoring natural hierarchy. They struck without warning, kidnapping designation, fluid children, attempting to fix them through brutal reconditioning. When they took Sira's twins, something snapped in the kingdom's collective patience. "Enough," Theodora declared. "We've tried peaceful change, but those who harm children forfeit their right to mercy." For the first time since her revelation, Theodora embraced the full power of what she'd become. When she sang the hunter's anthem, a war song older than the moon-sun, every warrior in the kingdom felt their strength double. When Kalin played the drums of justice on the celestial organ, the sound traveled through the earth itself, leading them directly to the Pure Order's hidden strongholds. The rescue was swift and decisive. The children were saved, the Pure Order scattered, but what they found in the strongholds horrified them. Hundreds of journals documenting experiments on designation fluid children, attempts to understand and eliminate what they called the mutation. "They see evolution as disease," Prince Cassian said, reading through the documents. "Then we'll show them it's the cure," Theodora replied. She made a radical decision. Instead of imprisoning the Pure Order members, she commanded them to live for 1 month as the designation they despised most. Alphas became omegas, experiencing vulnerability and dismissal. Omegas became alphas, feeling the crushing weight of constant strength, all through a temporary alchemical transformation Morgana provided. "Understanding breeds empathy," Theodora declared. "Walk in another's form, and you might learn to respect it." The experiment was controversial but effective. Most emerged from their month transformed in more ways than one. Some became the kingdom's most ardent reformers, having experienced firsthand the injustice they'd perpetuated. One former Pure Order leader, an alpha named Victor, wept publicly as he apologized. "I didn't know. How could I have known what it felt like? The constant fear, the dismissal, the assumption of weakness. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Meanwhile, Kalin had established the Silent Symphony Academy, where those without voices learned to communicate through music. Sira became his first graduate, developing a form of musical sign language that combined movement with hummed melodies. During the Academy's first public performance, something extraordinary happened. As the students played together, some on instruments, some humming, some using their bodies as percussion, the audience began to understand them. Not their words, but their stories, their emotions, their dreams. "You've created a new language," Theodora told Kalin that night, pride shining in her eyes. He signed back, "We've created hope." But their greatest challenge was personal. Despite their love, despite their bond, they couldn't create life together. Two Omegas, even transformed as they were, couldn't conceive, or so they thought. One morning, Theodora woke feeling strange, not ill, but different, fuller, somehow. Kalin sensed it immediately through their bond, his eyes widening as his hand went to his own stomach. Morgana appeared, unsurprised. "The Moonsong's final gift," she explained. "You've transcended biological limitations. You're both carrying the same child, Theodora physically, Kalin spiritually. A child born not of designation but of pure love and shared essence." The pregnancy was unlike anything the healers had seen. Theodora carried the physical form while Kalin carried what they could only describe as the child's song, its essence, its soul. They could feel the baby through both of them, experiencing pregnancy from dual perspectives. "What will it be?" Theodora asked during one examination. "Alpha? Omega? Beta?" The healer shook her head in wonder. "All. None. Something new. This child will be whatever they choose to be, moment by moment." The kingdom held its breath, waiting for this impossible birth. The child was born during a lunar eclipse, when the moon itself seemed to pause in anticipation. The birth was unlike anything recorded. Theodora delivered physically, while Kalin collapsed in sympathetic labor. His body racked with phantom contractions as he delivered the child's essence into being. When the baby finally emerged, they cried with a voice that harmonized with itself, creating chords no single throat should produce. Their eyes shifted color steel gray like Thaddeus had been, warm brown like Theodora truly was, then settling into something entirely new, silver like moonlight. "Harmony," Theodora whispered, the name coming unbidden. "Harmony," Kalin agreed, though no sound left his throat. The word simply appeared in everyone's mind through the music of his touch as he cradled their child. Harmony was designation fluid in ways that defied comprehension, not just shifting between alpha, omega, and beta, but sometimes existing as all three simultaneously, or as something beyond designation entirely. They grew rapidly, walking at 6 months, playing simple melodies at 8 months, speaking in musical phrases by their first birthday. The kingdom watched, in awe and trepidation. This child was proof that the old ways were truly ending, that something new was being born. On Harmony's 2nd birthday, delegations arrived from across the continent. Some came to witness the miracle child, others to assess the threat they might pose to traditional structures. Among them was the High Oracle of the Northern Temples, an ancient alpha who had initially condemned Theodora's rule. "I came to judge," the oracle admitted, watching Harmony play with children of all designations, their forms shifting naturally to match their playmates' comfort. "But I find myself judged instead. This child, they're not an aberration, they're evolution, they're freedom," Theodora corrected gently. "Freedom from the boxes we've built for ourselves." The oracle knelt in alpha, kneeling to an Omega queen and her mute consort, and declared, "The temples recognize your reign. More than that, we recognize the new world being born." But recognition came with responsibility. Messages arrived daily from Omegas and other kingdoms, begging for help, for hope, for proof that change was possible. Theodora couldn't ignore their pleas. "We need to share what we've learned," she told her council. "Not through war, but through art, music, stories." Kalin had an idea. Using the celestial organ and a network of sympathetic musicians across the continent, he created the song web, a way to transmit music across vast distances. Every full moon, musicians would play simultaneously, their combined music carrying stories of the changed kingdom to every corner of the world. The first broadcast was Harmony's Lullaby, composed by both parents. Simple, beautiful, it spoke of a world where children could grow up free. By morning, 3 more kingdoms had announced reforms to their designation laws. Music changes the world faster than swords, Prince Cassian observed. But the greatest change was still to come. On Harmony's 5th birthday, Morgana appeared one last time, but she looked different, older, more translucent, as if fading. "My time ends," she said simply. "The curse I cast, the laws I broke, the magic I wielded, it all had a price." But seeing this, she gestured to Harmony, to the kingdom, to the world changing. It was worth it. "No," Theodora said, reaching for her. "There must be something." "There is," Morgana smiled. "Remember me. Remember that sometimes the witch in the story isn't the villain but the catalyst. Remember that curses can be gifts, that breaking can lead to wholeness." She turned to Harmony. "You, little one, are the future I dreamed of but never thought I'd see. In you, all boundaries dissolve. The moon song itself changed when you were born. It no longer tests or transforms. It simply celebrates what is possible when love transcends form." As she faded, her last words echoed. The moon song was never about the music. It was about finding the courage to sing despite the silence. Years passed. Harmony grew into a young adult who could play any instrument, sing in harmonies that shouldn't exist, and shift between forms as easily as breathing. But more importantly, they aged differently. The moon song's gift meant they would live far longer than normal, becoming a bridge between the old world and the new for centuries to come. Other kingdoms slowly, sometimes reluctantly, adopted reforms. The designation system didn't disappear overnight, but it loosened, evolved, became more fluid. Children were born who defied the old categories, and instead of being feared, they were celebrated. Theodora ruled for 40 years, with Kalin beside her as the silent voice of the kingdom. Their love never dimmed, their bond only deepening with time. When age finally claimed them, they passed within moments of each other, Theodora's last breath coinciding with the final note Kalin ever played. Harmony inherited not a crown but a legacy. Standing before the kingdom, they spoke with their impossible voice. "My parents taught us that love transcends form, that worth isn't determined by designation, that music can exist without sound, and souls can sing without voices. They broke the world's rules and rebuilt them with compassion. Now it's our turn to continue their song." The celestial organ, untouched since Kalin's death, suddenly played a single note, pure, perfect, impossible. On it was inscribed, "When the moon sings, it doesn't ask permission. It simply illuminates the darkness, showing us that we were never broken, we were always whole, waiting for someone brave enough to see it." The kingdom sang that night, a chorus of all designations, all voices, all hearts. The moon song continued. No longer a test or a curse or even a miracle, simply a reminder that love makes all things possible. 100 years after Theodora's revelation, the world barely remembered a time when designations were fixed. Harmony, still appearing young through the moon song's gift that granted them centuries of life, had become not a ruler but a teacher, traveling between kingdoms to help those struggling with their identity. In a small village, at the edge of what was once Theodora's kingdom, a young Omega named River was born without any voice at all, not even the ability to hum. Their parents, remembering the old stories, brought them to the capital, to the palace that had become a school. Harmony greeted them personally. their form shifting to match River's Omega designation for comfort. "No voice?" they said gently. "My father had no voice either. Let me show you something." They led River to the room where the original celestial organ still stood, maintained perfectly despite its age. On its bench sat Kalin's last composition, unfinished, waiting. "He left this for someone," Harmony explained. "Someone who would understand that silence isn't empty, it's full of possibility." River approached the instrument hesitantly, small fingers touching the keys. The moment they made contact, the organ responded not with sound, but with light. Each key produced a different color, painting music in the air that everyone could see. "The organ evolved," Harmony explained, tears in their silver eyes. "Just as we did. It learned that music doesn't need sound, just as love doesn't need words." River began to play, and their light music told a story of loneliness, of hope, of dreams bigger than any voice could express. The gathered crowd wept at its beauty. "This is why we remember," Harmony said, addressing not just those present but somehow speaking to the ages. "Not to worship the past, but to remind ourselves that every generation brings new impossible things into being." In the great hall, portraits now lined the walls not just of Theodora and Kalin, but of all who had dared to be different. Sierra and her twins, Prince Cassian, who defied his father, Beta Marcus, who stood by his king, Vesper, who saw truth before anyone else. Even Morgana had her place, painted in silver moonlight, reminding all that catalysts come in unexpected forms. River's light music drew crowds from across the continent. Within months, other voiceless children arrived, learning to paint their songs in aurora displays that danced across the sky. They called it the Silent Symphony, and it became the most sought-after performance in the world. "Your parents would be so proud," an elderly Sierra told Harmony one evening, watching River teach younger children. Though aged beyond a normal lifespan through the kingdom's advanced care, Sierra's eyes still held the spark of one who'd found her voice through music. "They are proud," Harmony replied, touching their chest where they claimed they could still feel their parents' essence. "The moon song connected us all. Death is just another form of transformation." As if in response, the celestial organ played a soft chord no one at the keys. It had been doing that more frequently, playing fragments of Theodora and Kalin's favorite duets at random moments, as if their love had soaked so deeply into the wood that it continued expressing itself. On the anniversary of the Great Revelation, the day Theodora revealed her true form, the kingdom held its centennial celebration. Representatives from every nation attended, including some from lands so distant they'd only recently heard the stories. "Is it true?" asked an ambassador from the far eastern realms. "Did an Omega really rule as an Alpha for 7 years?" "Come," Harmony said, leading them to the archive hall, where the memories were kept. The hall contained more than documents. Morgana's magic, in her final gift, had crystallized certain moments, viewing stones that let people experience history as if they were there. The ambassador touched the stone from the Revelation Day and gasped, feeling the fear, the courage, the earth-shifting change of that moment. "By the stars," they whispered. "It's all true. Truth," Harmony smiled, "is often stranger than legend." That night, River played Kalin's unfinished composition, completing it with their light music. As the final note painted itself across the sky, a silver cascade that looked like liquid moonlight, something extraordinary happened. Every designation fluid person in the kingdom, every voiceless soul, every individual who had ever felt broken or wrong or insufficient, suddenly felt it. A connection, like invisible threads, linking them all. For just a moment, they were one vast symphony of different notes creating perfect harmony. "The moon song web," Harmony breathed in recognition. "They didn't just change the kingdom, they changed the very fabric of how we connect." In the months that followed, the phenomenon spread. People discovered they could sense others, like them, not telepathy, but a kind of emotional resonance. The isolated were no longer alone. The voiceless could sing through others. The rigid could find fluidity. It's evolution, Prince Cassian's descendant, now an elder statesperson, observed. Not of the body, but of the soul. The pure order, or what remained of it, made one last attempt at restoration. They attacked during the spring festival, using ancient talismans meant to lock people into single designations permanently. But River and the other light musicians responded with something unprecedented. They played the moon song, not the original, but a new version, one that embraced silence as much as sound, darkness as much as light. Their combined light music created a barrier that didn't just stop the talismans but transformed them, turning tools of restriction into instruments of liberation. The Pure Order members, touched by the transformed talismans, found themselves experiencing every designation's simultaneous feeling, the full spectrum of existence. Most fell to their knees, overwhelmed by understanding they'd spent lifetimes avoiding. "Forgive us," their leader wept. "We didn't know. We couldn't know." "Knowledge isn't just learning," Harmony replied. "It's becoming." As the second century since the revelation began, the world had fundamentally transformed. Designation still existed, but as a fluid spectrum rather than fixed categories. Children grew up choosing their forms based on comfort, necessity, or simple preference. Love knew no boundaries of biology or tradition. The celestial organs now there were many, each evolved in different ways, became gathering places where people shared their stories through whatever medium they possessed. Some used sound, others light, still others used touch, taste, or methods that defied description. In the original palace, now the world's first free academy, a new inscription appeared on the celestial organ, written in no known hand. "Every soul sings. The lucky ones find others who hear their particular silence and call it beautiful." River, now a young adult, touched those words and smiled. Through their light music, they painted a response in the air. "Thank you, Kalin. Thank you, Theodora. Thank you for showing us that broken is just another word for unique." The light words hung in the air for days. A reminder that the revolution wasn't just about changing laws or breaking curses. It was about learning to love ourselves exactly as we are, while becoming exactly who we're meant to be. And in the moon's gentle light, if one listened carefully, they could still hear it, the original moon song, played by no hands, sung by no voice, yet eternally present. A testament that love transcends form, that worth transcends designation, and that true music needs neither sound nor voice, only a soul brave enough to share its truth. As Harmony stood watching the new generation of light musicians, they reflected on their extended lifespan, a burden, but a gift, allowing them to be the living memory of transformation, the bridge between what was and what could be. "How long will you live?" River once asked them. "As long as the story needs telling," Harmony had replied. "As long as there are those who need to know that impossible is just another word for not yet attempted." The moon rose full and bright, and across the world, the song web activated. Musicians, light painters, silent singers, and countless others joined in the monthly ritual, not performing the same piece, but creating a tapestry of individual expressions that somehow harmonized perfectly. In a distant kingdom where Omegas were still oppressed, a young child heard the music for the first time. They couldn't explain how their village had no musicians, no instruments, but the song web didn't require such things anymore. It had evolved, like everything else the moon song touched, into something that transcended its original form. The child began to hum softly, secretly, but it was a beginning. "Every revolution starts with a single note," Harmony said to the wind, knowing somehow that their words would reach that child through the web. "Sing, little one. Sing in whatever way you can. The world is listening, And your voice, however, it manifests matters. The celestial organ played one final chord, completing Kalin's composition at last. But it wasn't an end in it, was an invitation, a reminder that every story of transformation was really just the beginning of the next one. And so the song continues, will always continue, as long as there are hearts brave enough to sing their truth and souls wise enough to listen. In the archive hall, a new viewing stone appeared mysteriously, this one showing not the past but possibilities. Those who touched it saw themselves not as they were, but as they could be, if they embraced their fullest truth. River was the first to touch it. In the vision, they saw themselves teaching thousands, their light music illuminating not just the sky, but hearts across dimensions. They saw a world where voice was just one of infinite ways to communicate, where silence was recognized as its own language. Your parents began something, River told Harmony, but we're the ones who'll complete it. No, Harmony corrected gently. We continue it. Completion would mean the end of growth. And that's the one thing love never does. It never stops growing, changing, becoming more than it was. The moon sang that night, not metaphorically, but literally, its light carrying harmonics that only the transformed could hear. It was said that Theodora and Kalin's love had been so powerful it had awakened something in the moon itself, teaching it that even celestial bodies could transcend their assumed limitations. And in every kingdom, in every village, in every heart that had ever felt less than, the moon song played on, forever. We are not broken instruments awaiting repair. We are unique symphonies awaiting an audience that understands our particular beauty. And sometimes, we must become that audience for ourselves first. Final teaching of Harmony? Inscribed in light above the world's first free academy, visible only to those who've learned to see with more than their eyes, hear with more than their ears, and love with more than their hearts but with their very souls. Thank you for listening to today's story. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop your country and the time in the comments below. It's amazing to see our story family connected across the globe, listening at different hours but sharing the same journey. See you in the next story.